task force for the City of Wilmington. We are online and in person here at City Council for anyone who's able to join us. And are we live streaming? Johnny, is that the case?
No, we're not.
Okay, just checking. Just recording. Okay, no problem. Today we're going to take a little time to review a report outline and discussion. We'll also have some time for public comment for those who are interested in giving public comment. The purpose of this task force is to review the fines and fees of the city and the practices that the city uses to collect on those fines and fees. And our goal is to have a task force report due by March 30th, which is an extended due date for us. And so we have other task force members on the call. I'm the co-chair, or the chair, Cheyenne Miller. We have Kaylin Richards, Maria Cabrera. I believe we will be receiving a couple more people soon, but wanted to get us started. Oh, Christian's here, but she just got in the thingy. I'm gonna promote her to panelist. Hi, Christian. And Christian Willauer. But I was hoping we could take a little bit of time to review our report outline and just talk through like what data we've been able to receive over the last several months, 6, 7 months, 8 months. Have some public comment after that. So generally we've been corresponding with the City of Wilmington to receive data related to fines and fees in multiple areas, including parking tickets, red light tickets, fines and fees related to vacant properties, fines and fees related to code enforcement and like instant tickets, as well as like business fees and a few other areas as well. And we have received a lot of data from the city, so we appreciate the city providing the data that we needed. I do believe there are a few outstanding data requests, but given what we've been able to collect from the city, we did our best to pull together a report. I want to say thank you to Christian for helping do a lot of the legwork on that. I really appreciate all that work you did, Christian. And I'd like to take the time to go through this report, which I will share my screen correctly. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
We do.
Cool. This is something that we'll also share via email. So the individuals who are task force members who are interested in reading this will have it in their email at the end of the day so that you can look through, give your feedback, ask your questions. Ideally, what we'll be doing is we'll be having one meeting a month all the way through March, including in March, so that we're able to provide feedback on what data we've got, feedback on recommendations, and finalize recommendations by the end of March, so that we can provide a report directly to the City of Wilmington so that they can act upon it. And so I'd like to jump in. I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts before we kind of go into this. Thank you.
I'm ready whenever you are.
All right, cool. So jump in when you need to. I'm just going to kind of walk through this real quick. Just to remember, we did say back in the beginning of this task force, which I'm not going to lie, it was a while ago, March 2023, that we wanted to provide the community with a report that was going to be visual. And this will serve as a general outline of that report. And of course, your feedback will be accepted and incorporated into that report as well. So this is not final as just to make sure that everybody's clear on that, but this is something that hopefully will actually review what fines and fees and administrative sanctions there are. Our goal is to make sure there's fairness in the application of those and the enforcement of those and make recommendations for reform. And I think it's important to lay out for the community that the Wilmington City budget has 3 major categories. And this kind of does that and allows for people to be able to understand what it is that we're talking about. The city does use fines and fees to collect revenue so that the city can run. Just in general, it's important for the community to know that the general fund, the water or sewer fund, and special funds are three major areas of the budget.
And Cheyenne, I can walk through this too if you want me to, or you can do it to you.
It doesn't matter. If you'd like to, it's fine.
Well, you're doing great, but maybe a little bit later on, maybe I can jump in.
Yeah, feel free. Whenever you need to. If you have something you want to add on a slide, just go right ahead. So basically, the finding was that fines and fees are operating like a flat tax where everybody's paying the same amount. So as opposed to what we normally see with taxes, where you're okay, sorry, I just saw a hand raise. Blake, I am going to answer your question during the public comment section of this. Unlike taxes that go up or down depending on your income, fines and fees are the same price, so it doesn't really matter what the income is of the person is paying. And to distinguish between the two, fines are what we give people when we're trying to enforce them following the rules, whereas fees are what we use to charge the service, charging for a service. Like we charge a fee for water and sewer. The problem here, though, is that Wilmington's been using fines and fees to generate revenue, which pretty much shifts the burden of paying for city services on those people who have the least ability to pay. And what we're seeing is that when the cost of fines and fees are rising, people are facing a lot of financial hardship, especially if you don't have a higher income. We're seeing a lot of people who are going delinquent, and what's happening is that the cost of actually collecting on those fines and fees are actually impacting the city's bottom line. In other words, it costs a lot of money to collect on fines and fees. One of the areas of revenue that we've seen go really, really high is the water bills. So water bill fees are actually tripling over the course of 2003 to 2022. And it's just been getting super high essentially over this time. Now, mostly city residents are water customers. They're paying over $40 million more for water services in 2023 than they did in 2003. So that's over the course of 20 years.
And I just think it's important to note from this slide, and this is something that we really need to discuss, is how much more water bills have increased. This is something that we found in the data that I think really surprised. I mean, we all know that our water bills have been going up, but it was really clear from the data that water bills have been going up like kind of disproportionately compared to all the other sources of revenue. So like the wage tax has gone up over the same 20-year period. The revenue that's come in for the general fund, but from the wage tax has gone up by 70%. Net profit tax, it increased by 145% over that same time period. Like you can see property tax increased by 53% over that time period. But water sewer fee, like direct revenue from water bills, it increased like 184%. So it's just like really the growth of our water bills for like direct users has really outpaced the growth of all the other revenue sources. So it's something that we really need to pay attention to, because people who are paying the water bill are, a lot of just, it's a basic human need to pay for water. And when that bill goes up like so quickly, it can just go up higher than what people have the ability to pay, which is part of what we're seeing in Wilmington.
I have a quick question.
Hey.
When you're looking at the overall increase of the fees from the, like you said, 2003 to currently 2023, does that factor in monies that was owed to the city from Newcastle County, because we do service some of their residents, and they have to pay us an amount that they were negligent and didn't want to pay until, Perzicki had to take them to court or do whatever they had to do. But the point is that we did start to see that that money's coming in. Was that factored in when you look at the total monies coming in, or is this just on straight billing?
So that we're going to get to that next. That's the next slide. But this is straight billing. This is like if you are a direct water customer from the city of Wilmington, that's where like all the revenue growth has been for the water sewer fund. So let's go to the next slide, Cheyenne, and talk about Newcastle County.
Yep.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You got it.
You want me to go ahead?
Yep.
So Newcastle County pays like all the a lot of the sewer. Newcastle County has a sewer system, but the water, like the wastewater running through that system, gets treated. The sewage gets treated by the water utilities, the Wilmington Water Utilities water treatment plant. So that's owned by the city of Wilmington, and that's run by the city of Wilmington, and that's part of the water. All the expenses for that are paid for by the water sewer fund, and all the revenue goes into the water sewer fund. So Newcastle County pays like a bulk rate for the city of Wilmington to treat the sewage for northern Newcastle County. And that blue there, the Newcastle County charges, you can see they have like not gone up nearly as much as direct user charges have over those 20 years. In fact, they've stayed like relatively stable. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that Newcastle County wastewater treatment payment, that bulk payment, which it's these two sources of revenue for the water sewer fund. There's like the direct user fees, which are water bills, and then there's Newcastle County's wastewater treatment payment. Newcastle County's wastewater treatment payment over 20 years has gone up by 42%. At the same time, the direct user fees have gone up by 184%. So back in the day, 2003, Newcastle County charges were like almost 40% of the total water sewer fund revenue, and direct user charges were 61%. So it was like 60-40. Now Newcastle County, because they haven't seen their charges go up that much over those 20 years, while direct users have, now Newcastle County charges, it's like $20 million, but it's 24%. It's gone down as a percentage. It used to be like 40%. Now it's just 25%. Whereas the direct user, they've seen the charges go up by $40 million, and they're paying a much bigger portion, like 75% of the total. So Newcastle County and their direct payment they have managed to keep their water bills stable, whereas users, customers have seen their water bills go up. Does that answer your question, Councilman Cabrera? I think this is a really important issue.
Thank you.
The other thing that's really important, besides that kind of issue of the balance between like Newcastle County and the direct user and the increasing costs, and how that burden of increasing costs is being shared, that's like the one really important issue that has come out of looking at the data that the city's provided to the Fines and Fees Task Force. And the other really important thing that is part of the picture is that the city is using the water sewer fund to pay for both water sewer expenses and general city expenses. So the water sewer fund pays for the public works department. That's where most of its money goes. That's where people are delivering water sewer services. The water sewer fund also pays for a little bit of the audit department. It also pays for like a big chunk of the finance department. And what's interesting about the finance department is the finance department doesn't have a separate like water sewer fund, like staff division. It's all just one finance department, but the water sewer fund pays for like a good portion of the finance department's total expenses. And then in addition to that, the water sewer fund pays this thing called indirect costs, which is just like a payment to the general fund, and then the general fund uses that money to pay general fund expenses. So those are indirect costs. If you go to the next slide, so, one thing that's really important, a dynamic that really you have to pay attention to in looking at kind of the role of the water bill as a fee in the total budget is that the water divisions of the Public Works Department, they have been growing. Like 2017 to 2022, though that water division, their expenses grew by 11%. So there is growth, and like nobody wants to starve like the actual delivery of water sewer services. Like that's really important to invest in. But if you look at what's going on with the water sewer fund, really a lot of the growth in the total like amount of expenses paid for with the water sewer fund, it's really all those other expenses that are not the water division where all this like extra money is being spent from the water sewer fund. So you can see that like in this line, if you look at the audit, the money from the water sewer fund that's paying for the audit, the money from the water sewer fund that's paying the finance department, the water sewer fund that's paying for like indirect costs, which are all these other city department costs, that all has gone up like since 2017 to 2022, that went up 43%, even though the water division expenses just went up 11%. So that's just really important dynamic to pay attention to, and make sure that we're not asking people who are paying the water bill to actually be paying like other city expenses that are unrelated to the water bill. So then if you go to the next section. Yeah, just 85% of, the water sewer fund is paying for, the water division expenses, but there's this increasing portion of the water sewer fund, and it was just 7.5% in 2017, and now it's 9% that is paying for like indirect costs, which is just this payment into the general fund to pay for general city expenses. So again, we got to really make sure that the water sewer fund is for water sewer fund expenses, and that we're not asking the water sewer customer to pay for things that aren't related to the water bill with the water bill. And then the next slide.
Sorry, Councilmember Tish Bracy, I'm gonna take you off mute.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I just had one, and I don't even know if it's a point of clarification yet, but something that we should flag. My understanding with some of these additional costs, they are water sewer related. For example, the finance department is the one that issues the bills, the water bills. So the water sewer fund fees that are used in the finance department, to my understanding, is to cover the finance department's portion of as it relates to the work that they do regarding, they're the ones that collect and issue water bills and all of that. So it is something I'm going to flag to just confirm. I appreciate the research that you guys have done, but if I'm not mistaken, this will be an important conversation as we go into the budget process to clarify. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's really important to remember that there is, when you're talking to the finance department, there is no separate, there's 2 water meter people, but I think they're the only dedicated staff in the finance department that are dedicated to the, and this is all like a conversation, right? This is an initial set of research, and we want to just confirm. So Councilwoman Bracy, like, absolutely, we have to understand what's going on. This is just what it seems to be true, but a very important dynamic is that the finance department, it's like $9 million, and there's about 4.5 million of that finance department is the parking division. And then, if you take that out, there's like $5 million left, right? If you take out the parking division from the finance department's like $9 million, you have $5 million left. And then you have and that's paid for with the general fund. And then the water sewer fund is paying 5 million. So I think a real question is like, how much is it really costing the finance department to issue bills and collect bills for the water sewer fund, or is the water sewer fund carrying more than its share of the finance department costs?
Just to say, since we let council member Tish Bracy ask a question, I think we should extend it to Blake. So Blake, I don't know if you want to ask a question still, but I'm just gonna give you the option to unmute. And then Shanae is in the attendees section. I'm trying to promote her, but for some reason it won't let me. Like, it won't actually do it. So,
Already
no,
been
it just did it.
promoted.
You the bomb. Thank you. Blake, if you want to ask a question, you can come off mute.
Yeah, I just accidentally raised my hand. I'm sorry about that, but thank you.
No, you good. You good. I'm gonna go to the next slide, Christian.
Yeah, so that's just an important dynamic. In addition to the dynamic of the direct user fee going up like a lot, and the Newcastle County's payment going up like much more slowly, the other dynamic is this dynamic of the water sewer fund paying like additional expenses beyond the water division, and then how that through paying for the finance department and also paying for indirect costs, and just make sure that all of that is actually related to water sewer delivery. So reason why it's so important is because the water bill is, you're really asking the same number of people just to pay more, and so Wilmington's population, and this is true for all fines and fees, like when we're looking at increasing revenue from fines and fees, it's like the same group of people like paying more through fines and fees, and that it's different in other kinds of revenue are different, but with fines and fees, like you have 37,500 water customers, and they pay $40 million more. Like that's that same customer base that's paying more. So here we are with the City of Wilmington. It's got a population of about 70,000. It's about the same as it was 20 years ago. Again, the income haven't grown that much. So, the median income in the City of Wilmington is about $50,000, which is only about $14,000 more than it was 20 years ago, which is an increase of about 28%. So people's incomes haven't kept pace with some of the increases in fees. And it's also very important, the distribution of income. There's a half, with the median income of 50,000, half of the population is making less than that. In Wilmington, there's a lot of households, 1 in 4, almost 9,000 households have incomes of less than $25,000 a year. And it's also really important to note there's a significant wealth divide, and that the median income for white households is quite a bit higher than for Black households and for Latino households. So when we're talking about fines and fees, the distribution of the impact is felt differently by families, with different income levels. And that there's a big correlation around race and income level in the City of Wilmington. So basically it hits some communities more than others. So that if you hit the next slide, if you go to the next slide.
I think Maria has a question.
Well, yes, thank you. Thank you for calling on me. I think what Christian said, it is true, because in the City of Wilmington, we have not seen the incomes go up. We have seen the rents go up. We have seen the property, the cost to buy a home has gone up. So those things are very fair to put out there. I guess my point was that in comparison to other municipalities, because I know this has come up before, during the budget, when we talk about what people pay in Wilmington for water and utilities versus in other areas. Where else could someone live where they would have their fees would be lower than what they are in Wilmington, even though we have seen them go up? And the other point, I guess, I was just thinking is that when we think about all our city departments and how the city is funded, it's not like the police department is funded by revenue that they generate, or the fire department. So the utilities is what tongue tied there, that generates through these fees and through the fines, which the fines are definitely when people are not, when they're doing something to break a rule or to have people comply with the rules. So, I mean, we can't just say that the water division should only be paying for the water and that's it and nothing else, that revenue doesn't go into the general fund to pay for other things and other services that people use. So I was just wondering, in comparison, when we're looking at this in the big picture, how does that compare with other cities? Understanding the challenges that we have here in Wilmington, and I don't think of any municipality where certain departments are self-sustaining. LNI, like all of these people, that is money that's generated through all the different taxes and fees and the fines.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge variation in in what is charged for water across the country, you know? And so public water utilities, some of them deliver water sewer services at like much more affordable rates. Some of them obviously charge more, but there's a lot of variation. And then just to your second point, so there are definitely cities out there that charge less for water than Wilmington does. But there is also, to your other point, the water sewer fund, you know, the reason there's the general fund, which raises revenue to pay for general city services. And then there's the water sewer fund, which really is supposed to be, you know, a fee that pays for the service of delivering water sewer services. It's not really supposed to be, you know, like the general fund is supposed to be the place where you raise the necessary revenue to pay for the general city services. And there's a bunch of different sources of revenue to pay for, you know, to raise money. Like there's property tax, there's wage tax, there's you know, net profits tax. There's all these different sources. So they're supposed to be basically separate activities and separate revenue streams.
Okay, thank you for that response.
I see another hand raised, Ms. Marshall.
Yes, I just want to clarify that there are no funds from the water sewer that's going to the general fund to pay for anything. You know, I just want to make sure that I address the question that Councilwoman Bracy had raised. So, you know, I just want to clarify that there are no funds going from the water sewer fund to pay for general fund costs. It's two separate funds and it's for two separate purposes. So when it comes to the finance department, there are charges, you know, that are non-general fund that are for water sewer purposes. For example, I mean, there is billings, people who does the billings, there's cashiers, there are people in that division that go and do collections pertaining to water. So a percentage of their cost is charged to the water sewer fund. And that isn't something that's randomly determined by like the finance department. I mean, there was an outside entity that actually comes in that looks at every single position to make sure that whatever that allocation is, that it is based upon a proper cost for the water sewer fund. And I just want to be clear, I'm not here to defend the administration or anything, but I just want to, you know, just make sure that from a council perspective, that, that council persons are aware of that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just, you know, like what we want to do is like basically this is like this task force, you know, we had the opportunity to like look at some information and it seems to point to like certain conclusions. And, you know, if those conclusions are like not correct, we want to clarify it through this process. But if you go up like a little bit, Cheyenne, to one of those earlier slides.
I will, just give me a second. If you're done asking your question, put your hand down because it's confusing me. And which slide would you like me to go to? And just for a
It's the
check on
one with the
time,
water
we have to
sewer
be
fund.
done
If
by
you just keep-
5:30.
If you go up a couple.
Okay. For a check on time, we need to be done by 5:30. So I just want to say that because we got 26 slides and we just ended 13.
Okay, well, I just wanted to, you know, speak to the fact that like the water sewer fund is paying for general sewer city expenses like a couple different ways. One is like paying the finance department, like maybe, you know, it's absolutely, you know, water sewer fund related, but it seems like it's a little high. So we should just, you know, it'd be great to look into that a little bit more. And then the indirect costs, like $7.5 million for indirect costs. Again, like how is that determined, and and why is it growing so much faster than, you know, the water sewer division? But I think that it's really important area to look into is what the water sewer fund is paying for besides just like things that are related to water sewer division. I guess this fines and task force, I would just recommend the fines and fees task force to like ask for clarification around that.
I've been adding questions into the notes for those of you who are looking at me typing related to these. And if there are questions that aren't getting covered and you're worried about it, just toss them into the chat and I can make sure they get added in. But just wanted to let you know that I am adding those questions in. And I'm
Real
gonna jump
quickly,
to slide
Cheyenne, if you
14.
could add one more, and that would be is when asking these questions about where, you know, where the money's being spent, ask specifically on the replacement of the water pipes, because I know that the city has an ongoing project to replace these old ceramic pipes that we've seen busted several times and have had 2 sinkholes that I can recall where the whole street just caved in. So I know that is a priority of bringing our infrastructure up to par. So if you could maybe put in there like what percentage or how much money is being spent on that directly or indirectly. Okay, thank you.
And again, like if you can, you know, in terms of the spending, like it's pretty clear that the city is spending 85% of the water sewer fund on the water divisions of the public works department. Like most of the money is going there, but there is also a lot of money going towards like other expenses, and those other expenses have been growing more quickly than the expenses that are spent on water sewer. So, you know, it's worth just checking out. Like, it's not to say the city's not spending the water sewer fund on replacing old pipes. It just seems to be spending more money on like general city activities. So in terms of, you know,
quick, I just want to recognize that Councilmember Chris Johnson has joined us.
So then, I don't know if you go up one slide. So people's revenues, people's, you know, money, people's income's not going up as fast as some of these bills are. And, you know, a lot of people are behind in the water bill. Almost 1 out of every 3 customers is 30 days past due on their water bills. And the average water bill, and we got this information from the finance department, that the average water bill was $93. If you do the math, multiplying that out, it's more than 4.5% of the monthly income of somebody who has an annual income of less than 25,000. So like the average water bill in Wilmington would be unaffordable for someone with income of less than 25,000. So basically, you know, there's just, as water bills goes up, there's more people who find them unaffordable. And if you go to the next slide, there's 8,000, and this again came from the finance department, there's 8,000 residential customers in the city that owe money they owe a total of $6.5 million. Then there's there's 11,500 customers total. So, the balance is 3,500 customers who owe 16.5 million, for a total of 23 million delinquent. But the city is using, one question that came up from the research is just that the city seems to be using water shutoffs and 96-hour shutoff letters to residential customers, but not other customers, even though it seems like other customers seem to owe more than residential customers. So if you look, if residential customers owe 6.5 million and other customers owe 16.5 million, the collections focused on residential customers, has a lot of impact, but it seems like there might be opportunities for collecting some of the 16.5 million from the other 3,500 customers who maybe owe more. Or, it's just like, what is the focus on doing 96-hour shutoffs and 96-hour, why is collections focused on the residential customer, and especially the residential city customer? And if you go to the next slide, a lot of the, that as part of collections, the city does send 96-hour shutoff letters and then shut off water for residential customers. And it's just really difficult for residential customers to live without water. So it's a very strong collections tactic. And, if people don't have the money to pay the water bill because it's outpaced their ability to pay, and then they lose water as a result of that, it's just one recommendation to the, that from the Fines and Fees Task Force might want to, it's just like, how does this make sense? And what do we need to do to fix it?
Can you unmute? Can you hear me?
And then moving on, there's more, but on that topic, but in terms of fines, if you go to the next slide.
Hold on a quick second. Kobe said he has a question.
Hey, Christian. Sorry, I'm in person now. Going back to that, oh, there it is. It's up on screen now. When it comes to the low-income neighborhoods, the tax rate for water and sewage has gone up quite a lot recently, correct?
Yes.
And cost of living has also gone up, but the people living in those neighborhoods probably haven't seen their salaries increase. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, not as fast as these other things have gone up. That's the crunch right now.
So it seems as though by creating a system in which an unfair taxing system is now taking place, especially in these low-income neighborhoods, because of the city's lack of additional revenue streams and using fines and fees as that revenue stream mainly, this will cause these low-income communities, which are already cost burdened, to suffer an even greater cycle of debt without any equitable way of getting out of that, when they had really no say in their taxes being raised, correct? Would you agree with that?
I mean, that general point, generally, I think that's what this data shows. And it's it's not taxes, it's fees, the fee is going up, the water bill is going up. And everybody needs water. So, it's a flat fee, and the lower income people are paying the higher water bills the same way that higher income people are. But for the lower income people, it can have really bad consequences because they can't really afford it, and that's just basically a problem that the city needs to look at and make sure that the way it's doing its budgeting, it doesn't impose those kind of harms like you talk about. And there are, just again to point out, there the water bill is just one source of revenue from the city. I mean, there's all these different sources. There's property taxes, wage taxes, and so and getting money from those different revenue sources has different impacts, especially on different groups, and especially with like relation to equity. And I think that's something that this group wanted to point it out. You wanted to consider, like we wanted to consider, like all through this process. So I think the equity issues definitely come up here, like you're talking about, Kobe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what needs to come from this is a framework that is more equitable for people, because the White House Council of Economic Advisors have said multiple times that relying on fines and fees to fund government services is inefficient because of the inability of so many now, because of cost of living also going up, are unable to pay, or it creates a cycle of debt, right? So yes, why we keep, as a city, keep raising these fees, it just creates more hardship for the people who are living here right now, which then causes even more issues. But I also agree with you on your point about the water shutoffs as well too. I don't think that is a useful tactic at all, and probably should be eliminated from the city altogether. It's not. It's inhumane. And again, shutting someone's water off it's just so inhumane. That's all I have to say.
Okay, so I know that we only have a couple more minutes, so I'll just try to go quickly here. So fines, so that was all fees. Now we talk about fines. Fines, Wilmington collects a lot of different fines, like parking tickets, red light tickets, instant tickets, code violation fines. I do have to acknowledge that due to the leadership of Councilwoman Cabrera and like others on this call, that fines have been, the parking ticket has been reduced to from $40 to $25 if you pay within the first 14 days. I know Councilwoman Darby and your work also on fines has been, you know, a huge contribution to this conversation and to making that really significant change. Councilman Johnson, I don't know who else is on this call, but I know all of you supported that change and think it's like, that's like a significant change that's been happening in fines. But basically fines contribute, there's all these different fines in Wilmington. We all, you know, pay parking tickets, pay red light tickets, you know, sometimes instant tickets. And it's just like, it's a very small amount of total general fund revenue. Most revenue does not come from fines, even though fines are like such a big part, like, you know, a lot of people's lives in Wilmington. But if you go to the next slide, fines are actually growing. Oh, you got to go back up. Sorry, we're almost done here. But they're growing. So fine is growing. In 2004, it was just 2.8% of all general fund revenue, and it's up to 4.4%. So you can see from the slide that it went up a lot, you know, then it came down a little bit during the pandemic, but, you know, all the way on the right-hand side, it's going up pretty steeply now. And a lot of cities like ours, again, you know, looking at other places, have less than 1% of their general revenue from fines. So we're kind of an outlier there. And if you go to the next slide, you know, generating, like Wilmington has a lot of fines and fees. And we have parking tickets, which are $40. Of course, they're only $25 if you pay within the first 14 days. Red light tickets, $110. Instant tickets for improper trash disposal, that's $100. The finance department's in charge of managing, you know, tickets. The tickets are between $40 and $110. We have an average, you know, annual revenue over the last few years of 5 to 8 million from fines. And it just adds up to like a ton of tickets. Like $5 to $8 million worth of $100 tickets is like 80 to 100,000 tickets every year issued. And then they have to be collected, they have to be paid, some people get behind, and so anyway, it's time consuming. And then if you go to the next slide.
She said next slide.
It's also very expensive. And as fines revenue has increased over the last 20 years, the city's expenses to process all those tickets has increased too. And the finance department like has grown a lot faster than some of the other departments. So, percentage growth of the general fund expenses spent on the police department have gone up quite a bit. The fire department have gone up quite a bit, public works, but the finance department has gone up like faster than everybody. And, you might just, maybe it's like, it's very time consuming and expensive and takes a lot of resources to process all those tickets. If you go to the next slide. The finance department is in charge of the parking division, which is where parking tickets and red light tickets happen. A very large portion of the finance department's expenses are going to outside contractors. They're going to Conduit, which manages the parking ticket contract, and they're going to Conduit, which manages the red light ticket contract. So for all the general fund expenses, that are paid for in the finance department, about half are going to the parking division, and then about half are going to all the other things the finance department does, which is like all the other departments, all the other income, like wage tax, all the other payments, procurement, everything like that. It's about half the finance department, and the other half is the parking division. And if you go to the next slide, and again, like, this is all up for discussion. If any of this is wrong, like, let's clarify it now. But this is what the numbers seem to show. And this is what our task force has to, like, get this right and, like, look at this and maybe check with the administration. And but this is what appears to be what the numbers say. And the city provided this data, which is basically 2018 to 2022, city issued about $38 million in parking and red light tickets. About 10 million was never paid. So that's still out there. 28 million people paid 28 million in parking and red light tickets. That's a lot of money coming out of, the budgets of families. About a little bit less than half went to Conduit, 13 million. And then there's another 15 million left after paying Conduit. And there was another, like, over the 5 years, there was $8 million in parking division expenses. So it's a net income of just $7 million. So, you issue 38 million, collect 28 million, pay everything, including half to a private company in New Jersey. And the revenue, Councilwoman Cabrera, you're talking about revenue for, the police and fire. It's like a fraction of what's collected. And so we have to ask ourselves, is this the best way to raise revenue? And the next slide. I don't know if you could go to the next slide. And then booting and towing. Booting and towing for overdue parking tickets. The city gives out, like, over 2018 to 2022, the city gave out 47,000 parking red light tickets. So 85% of those have never been paid. And the city has a contract with Conduit to go and boot cars to collect that overdue money. And they do booting and towing. Any vehicle where the owner owes more than $200 can be booted and towed. And then they also do registration holds. So anyone seeking to register a vehicle has to pay off their parking tickets before they can register. So those are the two ways that Wilmington makes sure that it's paid its what it's due with parking tickets. And if you go to the next slide.
Hold on, Christian, just real quick on that. So for the booting and towing, the outstanding, those tickets that aren't being paid, that says, and I'm just clarifying because I'm kind of far away from the screen right now, that says 85,000 of those tickets have not been paid, correct?
85,000 of the total 475,000.
Got you. And do we have a number on how many of those have been escalated to booting and towing that have not been paid?
No, but they're all open to being booted and towed. So the city, part of the contract with Conduent, and I don't think, it's unclear from the data that we have with, and it's worth asking the city if Conduent like boots and toes for red light tickets, but it appears that's just part of the contract for parking tickets. But maybe it's for red light tickets too. But we don't know how many, but we do know that the Conduent boots about 3,000 cars a year. And that's part of their contract to boot 3,000 cars a year. And there are a lot of cars out there that owe money. So they try to find 3,000 of them, through driving around, identifying cars that owe, and then booting them.
So
And if you go to the next slide.
hold on, I just had a few more questions with that. So I know in San Francisco, they actually reduced their booting, how much it costs to get the boot off and everything, and they saw people actually start paying theirs. But also when it comes to just the $200 limit to get a boot, I believe like a red light camera is like anywhere from $80 to like $100. People are still getting those, even though, they're still getting them for making a right turn when you're not supposed to get that anymore. It's still happening. It happens right coming down 202 all the time, and individuals always have to dispute it. I don't know why it's still happening. It was very publicly stated that that shouldn't be happening anymore. But when it comes to that, is the $200 limit is actually pretty low before you get booted, and then you get a bunch of other fees. You get your car towed away, and I believe there was an article that stated that you shouldn't have to pay a lot fee at a certain point, but you are paying it right away. The towing company that the city uses actually got in some trouble during the pandemic for some of their towing practices. Is there, again, I just want to make sure that we're looking at this in a more equitable way, that the residents of the city aren't being taken advantage of, and when that does happen, what mechanisms are in place to dispute that, right? So not everyone has money to hire a high-powered attorney to fight this to actually win.
Yeah, I mean, those equity issues are like a big deal. And if you go to the next slide, it kind of shows like what you're talking about, which is, parking tickets, $40. Again, it's a high number, especially, given the kind of incomes, like family incomes of a lot of Wilmington residents. So the city again provided some data. Thank you very much, for everybody who helped facilitate that. The city provided data on like outstanding parking tickets. They didn't provide data on like boots, but they provided data on overdue parking tickets. And you can see that a lot of the overdue parking tickets there's like parking tickets in every zip code. Like they provided parking ticket data broken down by zip code, and there are a jillion zip codes that have people who owe Wilmington parking tickets, but most of the zip codes, the numbers are low. And really the only zip codes where the numbers of overdue parking tickets are high are in Wilmington, because I guess they're Wilmington parking tickets. But they're like really concentrated, like 19801 has over 2,000, and 19805 has over 2,000, and then 19806 has less than 500. 19802 has 1,700. So people owe parking tickets maybe because $40 was too high, but this is where the city Conduent only boots in the city of Wilmington, so these are the people who are getting booted, and the really important thing about booting,
Christian, real quick,
that it appears, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, so you said they only boot in the city of Wilmington. So if someone, let's say in 19806 or in the Hocasson area, they owe money, are you saying that they will not go out there and boot their cars in their driveways?
think so. I mean, somebody should try to find the answer to that question, but I believe the only time you get booted is if Conduit catches your car or a car that you own somewhere in the city of Wilmington. I don't think they boot like outside of the city limits, but
Don't let me
Councilwoman
find
Ferrer
out
has
that they
her hand
ain't
up.
booting in city limits.
That's a great question.
Don't let me find out.
Hold on. Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
I am? Okay, good. I'm sorry. I was trying to find that. Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing that as well, because that's a good idea. Maybe we should be going to these people's addresses, but the whole point of it is to get people to be compliant. And before it gets to the point where you have to boot, certainly we want to encourage people to call, make payment arrangements, the same has been done with the water bill. And there has been money, thankfully for the ARPA, not to say that that's always going to be there, but one of the things that was discussed that the city would have, and I think we on council, maybe Councilman Johnson can chime in, made arrangements so that there would, and with Council Member Darby, that there would be, we would constantly fund to have monies available for people who cannot afford to pay the bill to be able to get it as a grant, money that they would not have to pay back, but that would help them pay their water bill if they get behind. That's one thing. I did share something in the chat. I don't know if it's going to open up, but it was a screenshot that I took because when they sent the 96-hour water shutoff notices, I went through to see if I knew anyone I could forewarn them. Whether it turns out to be the Hispanic American Association was on there, and I know them personally, and I reached out and said, hey, you're on the 96-hour schedule to get disconnected. I was able to talk with him. He said, yeah, we worked on it. We raised the money, etc. But when I looked at those names, when you guys had pointed out that it was more residential people than businesses, out of the 28, and this is just a screenshot of where they were. This wasn't the whole notice. I couldn't open up the file to share with you guys. Out of the 28 names on the list, 14 of them are LLCs and businesses, so they're not residential. So the businesses are getting the shut-off notices. Now, when it comes to the parking, this is something where this task force can, the members that are here, because you're all community-minded, you're out there in the community I'm going to be going to all the civic association meetings this year, hope to get most of them done before summer, but throughout the year, because I want to make sure that people know the things that they can put in place. And Christian, you had asked me about this before, and that is start to review your own neighborhoods. Do you need 1 hour limitations? Do you need 2 hour limitations? Do you need street cleaning every week? Because these are the tickets that people get in their neighborhoods. So now, really, the goal is to reduce the opportunity to give someone a fine, which I know is something this task force would like to do to make the fines more affordable, but the city is also looking at how can we reduce those gotcha moments? Let's make it so that people aren't getting fines for every little thing, like the street cleaning, because we all forget, you sleep in or you had a late night or something happened, you forgot to move the car. So if you don't need street cleaning every week, then why should we be out there giving out tickets for people who don't move their cars? The same thing. Does every neighborhood need a 1 or 2 hour limit for parking anymore? I know we did that in the neighborhoods that were closer to the city so that folks wouldn't lose their parking spaces to the people who work downtown. So the city is taking some proactive action to get rid of those gotcha moments so that people are not getting as many fines per se. But there is assistance for the water bill. So I did want to, clarify that folks can apply to get that help. And for us to really get the word out there so that communities can, come up with those ideas as to get rid of those gotcha moments. And with the red light tickets, because this happened to me, I did try to refute one. I did, get to look at the video, and I was shown that I was definitely in the wrong, and I did go through that red light. And there is data that shows that those intersections that have the red light cameras, that the accidents have gone down. And to Kobe's point, this happened to my boss, and I had to take her to get her car from the impound. She was stopping, but she was doing a rolling stop at that light over there by Preston's on Broome Street. And then she made the right, but she never came to a complete stop. So it is a gotcha, and when it's reviewed, if you refute it, most people will get it taken care of. But for the most part, people really need to make that complete stop. But that is a very that is an issue there, Kobe, and I'm well aware of that because I've had several people have issues with that particular intersection. That's where they got their ticket. So folks need to come down that hill, make a complete stop, and then make the right, and the camera won't flash. Sorry, that was just what I wanted to add.
So yeah, and the purpose of this thing is to, there may be some numbers here that are like, the Fines and Fees Task Force didn't have like any funding to, this is done by volunteers. Like there's a volunteer task force, there's a volunteer activity. So there may be numbers some here that are like a little bit wrong, or let's correct them. Let's take the opportunity to like really dig into these numbers before we publish our report and make sure that it's all correct. That's why we're having the discussion. But I think that the general themes that are, and patterns that we're seeing here are like true. Like, even though we may need to like look at certain numbers, I think the patterns that have emerged are things like that, as Kobe has said, we really have to take a close look at. And the thing about booting and towing that shows up in the numbers that I think we have to ask the finance department, could this really be true? If you look at how much the city collects, like the number seems to be incredibly small.
No, you should
like the collection for like total paid in collections. It looks like they issued 3,500 tickets. Maybe that's like 3,000 boots. They only collected $44,000. Like, it looks like the revenue from collections from booting is like really low, and that it just seems like a lot of pain for like very little revenue. So that's like something that really comes out of this particular information that was provided by the city about how much revenue they get from booting. And in addition to that, they pay conduit, in addition to the base contract of like $1 million+ they pay conduit like 30% of all the money they collect off of booting. And so it really, like, that might be a thing to really address, is the booting. And whether or not it's like worth it to do booting at all in Wilmington. And then if you go to the next thing, the next slide, just combined with aggressive collection tactics. And I would just call booting an aggressive collection tactic, and also, water shutoffs. It just like has a lot of harm. It causes hardship for many city residents. So, and towing. And then if you go to the next slide, this is just some proposed reforms, which of course our task force has to, make decision on. One would be just to stop harmful collections practices. Like, if booting really only generates $50,000 a year, and it costs like so much, it's just really worth it to consider stop booting and towing cars to collect payment for parking and red light tickets. Again, occupied properties, like, what about ending water shutoffs for occupied properties, working on collections like some other way? Then foreclosures, stopping foreclosures munitions actions for homeowners for overdue water bills. And then, there's penalties on people, like if you don't pay on time, you have to pay interest, like 18% interest on water bills. Like, if people are really not paying because they don't have the money, it just doesn't make sense to charge them more. So, like, one is just to look at the collections practices that the Wilmington has on the books to make sure that they make sense, both from the harm perspective and also from like the revenue perspective. And the second thing is that revise contracts to reduce harms and reduce costs. Like, it just seems like the parking ticket and collections contract might be like costing a lot of money, and maybe there might be ways to both reduce kind of the harm of the collections practices and the cost of like, just operating the program. And the red light ticketing contract same thing. You know, is Wilmington, like, what are we doing? You know, and these contracts are extremely expensive. They're taking a lot of money out of the pockets of like Wilmington residents. They may or may not be like, what are they achieving the goal of enforcement, or are they, you know, kind of a revenue generation mechanism that's like not generating a lot of revenue and is costing a lot to residents? So anyway, that's something to think about. And then another thing would be just to right size the fees to make sure that it's covering the cost of providing the service. For water bills, we didn't get a chance in this report to talk about vacant property fees and business license fees and rental property registration fees, but it's really important that, you know, the cost of those fees like matches the cost of providing the service. And then finally, you know, to develop assistance programs where needed to provide access to city services. So make sure that the cost of water isn't a barrier to people having access to clean water and sewer services. So that's really all.
So, and now, I do want to give public comment a chance to speak as well. And if anyone else here wants to speak, real quick, go right ahead. On the task force, sorry.
So I just want to add one thing. I know we have to go pretty soon. With the water billing as well too. I know it changed to monthly as well too, but people have complained about it not being consistent on when the bill actually hits their accounts when they want to pay for it online. So you can't really figure out when you're supposed to go on, and then sometimes it comes on like the day before. It's posted to your account the day before your late fee is going to be assessed to it. So most of the time people are missing it. Also with the monthly fees, it was supposed to save us some money, but you're getting a monthly transition fee that's added on to that, which is pretty much the same as it was when it was quarterly, which is just causing a lot of issues for a lot of people that I wanted to flag as well too when talking about water billing as well.
Okay, I am going to open it up for public comment. We don't have anybody in the room with us here. If you are in the Zoom, if you'd like to raise your hand, you can give public comment, give you a minute to speak. I do not see anyone raising their hand for public comment. This is like one of the few times that we have a quorum, I believe, and I am just like feeling the need to vote on our minutes, and I don't know if we can do that. Can we, Johnny?
You can, but you would have to identify which months you would like to vote on and ensure that everyone that is on the call now has had the opportunity to review them.
I am not clear as to whether people have had the opportunity to review the ones that were sent recently. Can you identify which ones that you sent recently? I forgot which months they were.
Yeah, I haven't, you actually have had the minutes, so I haven't sent any over in the last couple of months.
All right, well, hopefully you all show up next time we have a meeting, so we can actually vote on them, because I do not have them in front of me to be able to say which months they would be. But please, if anyone does get a chance, take the time to review the minutes and like to wrap it up. Cool.
Thank you for that. Should I make a motion to adjourn?
I do think we have a motion to
All
adjourn.
right, motion to adjourn.
Thank you all.
Someone has to second.
Yeah, y'all want to stay here?
Second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, you have to say
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
aye. All right, we going home.
Yeah, bye.
Take care, everyone.
Alrighty, good night.
Right.